Good morning, everybody. I have big news from Philadelphia. In Congress, on July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13th state United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to the other, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitles them. A decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them for the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men and derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to the ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter the former system of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let us submit the facts to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governments to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operations till his assent would be attained, and when so suspended, he is utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for accommodations of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in their legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with mainly firmness of invasions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby their legislative powers, incapable of alienation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasions from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for the purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing to assent to laws establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their office and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept amongst us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and acknowledged by our laws, giving his assent of the acts to a pretended legislation. for quartering large bodies of armed troops amongst us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should have committed on the inhabitants of the United States, for cutting off trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretend offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it of a fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule over these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun by circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civil nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of the frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is the undistinguished destruction of all ages, all sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions for our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of the attempts of their legislature to extend the unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voices of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish this and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved of all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. As free and independent states, they had full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all the other acts and things that independent states may do by right. And for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And so said they all. I will now add to the declaration by reading the names of the men who came forward and signed this, beginning with the South. From Georgia, Button Gwinnalt, Lyman Hall, George Walton. North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. From South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Haywood Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton. From Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Parker, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. From Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton. From the Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross. From Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean. From New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. From New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, and Abraham Clark. From New England, New Hampshire, Joshua Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. From Massachusetts, Samuel Adams, John Adams, John Hancock, William Treat Payne, and Eldridge Gary. From Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. And from Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, and Oliver Wolcott. That was the unanimous consent of our declaration, July 4th, 1776. And now we're going to have a shooting of the cannon, and I'll announce each volley in representative of each state of the 13 colonies. Original 13 colonies. December 7th, 1787, Delaware. December 12th, 1787, Pennsylvania. December 18th, 1787, New Jersey. January 2nd, 1788, Georgia. January 9th, 1788, Connecticut. February 6th, 1788, Massachusetts. April 28th, 1788, Maryland. April 23rd, 1788, South Carolina. June 21st, 1788, New Hampshire. June 26th, 1788, New York. November 21st, 1789, North Carolina. And May 29th, 1790, Rhode Island. And that concludes our ceremonies this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I wish you all a very happy 4th of July and happy birthday, America. Everybody be safe and be well. God bless you.